Quincy Promes, a player who won 50 caps for the Dutch national team and at one point was one of the most exciting wingers in world football. On February the 14th, 2024, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison for trafficking 1,360 kilograms or £3,000 worth of cocaine with a street value estimated of £65 million. Just a year before, in June 2023, Promes was found guilty of stabbing his cousin in the knee at a family party. Yet despite having two of the most serious charges against him and being sentenced to a combined 7.5 years in prison, Promes is still a free man, having just recently left Spartak Moscow and age 33 is still playing professional football, having not once ever stepped foot in a Dutch prison. So how the hell did we come to this situation where one of the most talented wingers in world football has been sentenced for assault and being behind one of the biggest drug trafficking systems in the Netherlands, yet is still playing football as a free man? Let's talk about it. Thank you to RYJ for the suggestion on my last true crime video, and also thanks to The Athletic, where I got the inspiration and details for this video from. I'll leave a link in the description to the articles used. If you want to see more of these true crime stories, do let me know. But let's get into the Quincy Promes story. So, let's start from the beginning. Quincy Promes started his career in the Netherlands for FC Twente in 2011, where he spent 3 seasons before moving to a Russian club, Spartak Moscow, in the summer of 2014. That year he also won his first senior cap for the Netherlands. He was named Russian Footballer of the Year in 2017 after a 4-year spell in Russia. He signed for Spanish club Sevilla in 2018. In 2019, Promes signed for his boyhood club Ajax, where he was a key player. He had been linked with transfer moves to England's top clubs and played for the Netherlands at Euro 2020, but Promes eventually moved back to Spartak in 2021, becoming the top scorer in their modern history, as well as the top foreign scorer in the Russian Premier League. It all seemed fairly normal, and he has had a pretty good career footballing wise. And up until that move to Ajax in 2019, it was pretty normal. That move was great for Promes, as he would enjoy perhaps the best seasons of his career in mainland Europe. But off the field, it was really where his life would turn forever. Now you see, let's properly start from the beginning, because we have to go back to his childhood. Quincy Promes was born in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, and as he described himself, was a street rat. If everyone else went left, he went right. Though Promes then insisted he was not a criminal, he described his childhood in an interview as moving from neighbourhood to neighbourhood with his mother after she divorced from his father, and he made new and quite bad friends and ended up in a tornado, as he described. This led to his previous spell at Ajax ending due to behavioural problems. Quincy sort of hanged around with some people who maybe weren't so good for him. Nonetheless, he did leave eventually to FC Twente, which was pretty good for him because it meant he escaped from that sort of lifestyle and those friends, and he would then move to Russia, as we mentioned, and it all seemed he sort of put that stuff behind him. amongst his best players. He was a coveted winger with the likes of Man United and Liverpool linked with him. He was making a lot of money, and he was a big name in Amsterdam. Of course, as we mentioned, he did not have the best of childhoods and had some maybe not so great friends. But now he was back in Amsterdam, of course he would have these connections still. And another sort of thing linked to this was, well, Promes was very much into rap culture, which of course is perfectly fine. A lot of footballers are into this. However, at Ajax, Promes was warned about the company he kept by two of the coaches who sat down to talk to him twice. On the first occasion, it was after Promes was seen with a rapper Joey AK. He was a rapper from a rap group called Zone 6, which had been linked with gun crime and international cocaine trade. The second time, it was because of his friendship with a half-brother of the gangster rapper Jason L, who has since been sentenced in prison for 18 years for murder. So clearly Promes was starting to now hang around with some not so great people back in Amsterdam in 2019. And the police to reconsider who he was associating with did not appear to have sunk in, which helps explain why Promes would become the most wanted man in the Netherlands. Now, generally speaking, Amsterdam is a pretty safe place. Catania in Italy tops the European Crime Index, followed by Marseille, Birmingham, Charleroi, and all the way down in 94th is Amsterdam. It also suffers from roughly half the crime in New York or London, yet the toleration of certain drugs, particularly cannabis, makes a destination for drug suppliers. While the Schiphol airport is one of the biggest in Europe, and therefore a convenient meeting point for drug traffickers. Now, Promes, back in Amsterdam in 2019, had started to get involved and hang around with the people, as I mentioned, who weren't so good for him, and he started to hang around people in the drug trafficking industry. Now, for a long time, Dutch police had caught on to this and started tapping the phone of Quincy Promes after first suspecting his involvement in cocaine trafficking in 2019. He was allegedly communicating with others about large-scale drug trafficking by using two encrypted messaging platforms, EncroChat and SkyEC, using a BlackBerry phone. Both were closed down after being infiltrated by the police in 2020 and 2021, helping the authorities make breakthroughs in these investigations into organised criminal groups, which has used the technology to communicate behind the prying eyes of conventional surveillance. Now, Promes was first monitored as part of Operation Porto into the trafficking of cocaine in and out of the Netherlands, and prosecutors revealed messages allegedly sent by Promes on the day in January 2021, when two shipments of cocaine weighing 650 kg and 700 kg passed through the Belgian port of Antwerp. "My boys are on their way to Antwerp," Promes said in a message on the day of the deal. The blocks of cocaine were allegedly marked with a black tiger logo and were concealed among bags of salts. The encrypted discussions detailed how one of the two batches had apparently been lost, to which Promes allegedly responded that he hoped it would be found. What followed was picture evidence, allegedly at the door of a warehouse, showing the trailer carrying one of the containers and clearly picturing cocaine inside. When west of Antwerp, Promes is said to have encouraged the men, saying, "Keep us informed. Get to work." The Dutch Justice Department believed Promes invested £200,000 into this drug deal. In that deal, it was alleged that the convicted drug trafficker Piet Wortel, another well-known trafficker, had earned €6 million from it. At the start of 2023, Promes had paid a substantial fine to Wortel, though, for a batch of drugs that was stolen by a rival gang. Now, this is where things start to get a little bit darker for Promes. According to the Dutch officials, Wortel, who was Promes' accomplice, was also suspected of being behind the 2019 murder of former professional footballer Kelvin Maynard, who was shot multiple times in front of a fire station in Amsterdam, allegedly in revenge for the theft of 400 kg worth of cocaine. Both Promes and Wortel denied these allegations. While Promes' lawyer described the suggestion his client had paid Wortel as total nonsense, Wortel's representative insisted there was little evidence over Maynard's death, calling the claims gossip. This was acknowledged in January 2023 that it still had no round case against Wortel, and 2 months later he was released from detention over these charges. It leaves Maynard's case unsolved. Unlike Promes, Maynard's career was pretty unremarkable. He played top-flight football in the Netherlands, but not for any of the leading clubs, before heading to Royal Antwerp in 2013. There, he met Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank, who took him to Burton Albion in 2014. According to reports at the time of Maynard's shooting, he spent his last afternoon at a flats. After bringing his wife and child home, he returned to Zuidis before parking his grey Volkswagen near a metro station, where he then met a group of Surinamese men wearing Nike tracksuits, who drove off in a dark blue polo. He was followed on a black scooter by 2 men, and when they stopped at a red light, they approached the side before firing several rounds at him from close range. His family suggested that he was a youth worker who had almost completed his college education. Yet a detailed report a day after the shooting suggests Maynard and his friends had recently bought plenty of very expensive things and was involved in stealing Wortel's and Promes' drugs. Now this is still speculation, but there is strong suggestion that Promes and Wortel were potentially behind the murder of Maynard as revenge. Anyways, so while the police were tapping into Promes' phone to get behind the drug trafficking and bring charges against him, it was during this investigation that another major twist would occur, as officers heard Promes discussing another crime he had committed in a very weird turn of events: stabbing his cousin. "Where did I hit him?" he asked a family member shortly after the incident, according to the conversations. When he discovered that he had hit his cousin in the leg, Promes thought it was lucky. "I didn't aim at his leg at all. I wanted to put it in his neck," he said, before adding, "Next time he will get bullets." And to his father, who intervened, he suggested, "You saved his life, otherwise I'd kill him." Though Promes was initially charged with attempted murder, it was downgraded to aggravated assault, as unfortunately the evidence was not admissible because they tapped into his phone due to his interest in the drug offences, not the the stabbing, so that evidence sadly could not be used, and so he was charged with assault. So now Promes has been charged with drug trafficking and assaulting his cousin. It's not exactly clear what made him stab his cousin and what exactly occurred at this family party, but all we know is there was some sort of altercation and an argument during a family party where Promes tried to kill his cousin, instead stabbing him in the knee, and Promes' uncle had to get involved. Yet, here's the thing. When Promes was sentenced to 6 years in prison, he was nowhere to be seen. Promes had not been present throughout the trial in Amsterdam and did not appear at his previous criminal case either, regarding the stabbing. Instead, just one day before he would be charged for the stabbing, he was pictured alongside his former Ajax teammate Hakim Ziyech at a party put on by a gambling company. And just before he was being sentenced for drug trafficking, he was playing a professional football match. So how, you might be asking, was Promes allowed to just get away with all of these very, very serious crimes? Well, you see, Promes has remained out of reach of the Dutch justice system. That is because Promes is based in Russia. Russia has no extradition treaty with the Netherlands on the back of the war with Ukraine, meaning that the Russian government are not required to send Promes to the Netherlands, and the Dutch authorities cannot go there to arrest Promes. Hence, Promes was casually living his life in Russia while all these serious charges were being put against him. And maybe it was a stroke of genius by Promes, as maybe he knew all along, while this was going on, that potentially the police would catch on, and so when he joined Spartak Moscow in a tactical move to avoid being charged, because he knew the Dutch authorities couldn't touch him in Russia. Or maybe it's a sheer coincidence that he moved to Russia, and when he moved to Russia back going to play for Spartak, it just so happened that the charges came along and the Dutch authorities couldn't get him in Russia. I will never know, but either way, it was a stroke of genius from Quincy Promes, as all the Dutch authorities could do was put Promes on the international wanted list and seize his 9 houses in the Netherlands. So Promes was a free man. His plan had worked. The Netherlands were pretty hopeless and couldn't really do anything to Promes. However, Promes would make one fatal error for one final twist in this story. You see, his plan had worked pretty well. Out at Spartak, he was enjoying his football, doing very, very well. As I mentioned, the Dutch authorities couldn't touch him out there, and of course with the war in Ukraine, Russian clubs have been banned from European competitions. So Quincy Promes wasn't going to have to worry about returning to mainland Europe to play European competition. He was pretty good. So that was until in February 2024, when Spartak Moscow headed to the UAE for a mid-season training camp. Promes joined them and all was well. That was until Promes was detained on suspicion of leaving the scene of a traffic incident. Now this really wasn't a big deal, it was a sort of minor car crash and he just left. He was released from custody the following day, but he did have to remain in the UAE until his court date for the minor charge. Now this was a problem, because of course the Netherlands by this point weren't tracking Promes' every move, as they had sort of lost hope, given he was in Russia for the whole time. But they did catch news that he was going to be staying in the UAE for a prolonged period of time now. We his court date, and so this was their chance to finally catch him. As, unlike Russia, the Netherlands and the UAE do have an extradition treaty. As soon as he was fined for his traffic incident, the day after he was arrested again, as the Netherlands sent an official extradition request for his drug trafficking and assault crimes to the UAE governments. This was it. Finally, they could get their man. Well, not really. You see, the way an extradition works is essentially the two nations sign a treaty which sets out some ground rules, basically saying, hey look, the UAE, if we have a Dutch criminal who's in your country, do you mind just sending them over? And the UAE say, yeah, sure, and then they just sell out some basic things like, okay, we'll send a request in, accept the request, and then just send them over when you get a chance. Now, these are just general requests, but they're not legally binding, meaning a country can, if they want, just say, nah, we're okay, and reject the extradition request. Now, this is rare because, obviously, why would you want a Dutch criminal in your country, right? But the treaty does not specify how quickly the extradition has to be arranged. It only stipulates that a decision needs to be made. No agreements on when the UAE can accept. And so, the UAE are still to this day, in April 2025, yet to officially respond and accept the extradition request by the Netherlands. Now, why exactly they're taking so long, I have no idea. But Promes is technically still under arrest in the UAE, and the extradition request is just sort of sitting there and is yet to be formalised and accepted by the UAE. But Promes must stay in the UAE until the extradition request is accepted or rejected. And so, for that reason, Promes, his contract was terminated with Spartak, and he said, well, I'm here for a while. So he has signed a professional contract with a UAE football club called Dubai United. And he is out there living life in Dubai right now as a free man, technically, awaiting this decision from the UAE governments. And so that brings us to the present day, where Promes remains playing professional football, living in Dubai, still technically as a free man, and has not once stepped foot in a prison for his crimes. Even if he does eventually get sent to the Netherlands by the UAE, he has appealed the decision, so now a long appeal process will begin, and it will take even longer for him to officially be in jail. The Promes case does open up an interesting story though, and has opened up a can of worms and alerted clubs to the dangers of young players associating with gangs and how that can really destroy footballers' careers. Promes at one point was a potential star in the making, yet he threw it all away due to messing around with the wrong people. This is something which has happened before in football and probably will continue to happen, and is definitely an issue clubs all around the world, particularly in areas where drug trafficking is high, must try to tackle and steer their young players away from. As for what happens to Quincy Promes, well, I have no idea, but all I can say is this is a footballer on the international wanted list for drug trafficking and stabbing his cousin in the knee. It's a story I did not think I would be covering on this channel, but here we are, and he is currently living life in Dubai. Yeah, pretty crazy. But anyways, I hope you found this video informative and relaxing. It was a pretty crazy story about Quincy Promes. Thank you for the suggestion. If you guys have any suggestions on who you would like me to see do next, and if you want me to do any more of these true crime have enjoyed